Alright, what's up, y'all? My name is Evan Strong. I am the founder of InTheImageClothingCompany, a clothing company where we address the human body's natural function, coming at it through the skeletal system. Today is the 22nd of March, 2025. Feels kind of different for me at this time to be out here because in the fall of 2024 is when I made most all of the foundational videos for the company talking about how clothing affects, and then I would discuss parts of the body, or I would discuss how certain parts of clothing affect the body as a whole. And I made a lot of videos like that, and there's a lot of series that we have that started in 2024. The Truth Behind series, where I go over parts of the body and how they actually work when we're not coming at it from being restricted through clothing. And I went over quite a lot of things in some of those foundational videos, and it was all out here outside in this area. And since then we've had fall and winter, and we have In the Image Clothing Company podcast, which is another third of our company, with discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ. As of today's date, we're on episode 84, which is awesome. We were only a few episodes into it back when I was out here so often last year. And we also have another third of our company, which is In the Image Clothing Company Music, where I'm a fingerstyle guitarist, as well as just all the other ways that I get into music. And I address how to keep the body just naturally functioning while we do approach doing things like fine motor skills with guitars and setups of instruments. So we here do what I'm talking about. We allow the human body to work. That first word there is the key one for In the Image Clothing Company: allowing this machine that we've been given by our God to just do what it will do, because it will never do anything else. And we're in a modern 2025. Clothing is placed onto us and it pulls the body out of its only centered position. On an earth with gravity, we have to stay centered with the spine, the sternum, the trachea, the nose, the jaw, stabilizing the entire body naturally. It has to be in its only position to do all those things. And when we place clothing on, if there's imbalances in it, it's going to alter the body. So seams, like the dreaded collar seam within t-shirts, zippers, drawstrings tied and twisting the hips, buttons, pockets, things in pockets which should never be done just because it's going to alter the body greatly, shoelaces laced unevenly or incorrect, collapsing the arches of the feet that are naturally there gripping the ground, tied unevenly, rotating the entire body from its foundation, heels on shoes, all these things and many more unnatural materials. The body doesn't want to be in anything that's not natural because it is natural. So this is what we talk about here, and we just address how to stop all the restriction that we can in our own personal situations. We address how to just get our own personal bodies to just naturally do what they were designed to, and we don't have to do exercises for that to happen. One thing that we do though is one-time releases. We bound up scar tissue that's commonly on mostly the right side of the body, the outside of the forearm, the outside of that right shin, the latissimus dorsi, that big muscle that spans back here, connects to the base of the spine and the upper part of the crest of the pelvis in the rear and comes up to the arm. The upper trapezius muscle, all these things on the right side of the body, because clothing imbalances are right-handed. Even if you're left-handed, the way that clothing is designed and where weights are going to be hanging, and the way that zippers are, the way that pants button, the way that pants are stitched in the rear, all these things that we talk about, it puts people into this right-handed pattern. Across the whole earth forever, oversized clothing will fall to the dominant side, and most people are right-handed, so it will then pull that side of the body away from its own center line, and the other side, being the left, really isn't so inhibited in human beings just about ever. So even for left-handed people, because of what I just discussed and more things within the world that are set up and geared toward people using their right hand for them. Okay, now let's talk about this. I'm going to do as I do, talk about where clothing has to sit. There's no opinion to the way that the skeletal system works, to the way that every neutral position of the body is just going to be there. It has to be allowed to when we're placing something onto it. So for everybody, a man, a woman, if you're tall, if you're short, if you're skinny or fat, any age, any part of the earth, any time period, these things are eternal because the body will just only ever do what it will do, and we have to let it. So our pants need to be entirely above our hips, all the way up off of the hips, so there's no restriction to the whole function of the pelvis. With the angle of the waistline of the pants, it needs to be slightly higher in the front than the rear, and only very slightly, but these core muscles, they need to stay contracted, shortened to just work, to do the thing they were designed to do. It's kind of like an apple, the core of the human being and the core of an apple. If you remove the core of the apple or something happens to it, the apple withers away. With a human being, if its core is ever not like fully activated, the whole body's going to suffer. The whole body's going to be trying to do some sort of compensation to the ends of the fingertips, to the tips of the toes, the top of the head, because if this deactivates, everything goes out of its only neutral position. Okay? So that's where the pants have to be on everybody. It doesn't matter. It's no kind of fashion thing, it's no kind of opinion, it's no kind of trend or time period thing, it's no kind of only if your body is shaped this way. No. The skeletal system only functions the way it does. So the tops that we wear, the seams on top of the shoulders need to be evenly behind these little bones that are on the top. Our shoulders naturally sit behind our bodies and really behind the head because that's where they connect. Right off the base of the spine, at the very rear of the base of the skull, those upper trapezius muscles come down and connect to the shoulders. And that's always only going to be behind us, completely like this. Now everything's neutral, okay? Now, the edge seams need to be right at the very edges because that's where the shoulder moves. Otherwise, you're just going to have a clash of a seam in a location where the shoulder isn't. So that's just how it has to be. For everybody, button-ups are different than a singular seam on top of a t-shirt because they have this band across the rear that naturally just sits behind the shoulders. So, shoelacing and tags, two of In the Image Clothing Company's prerequisites, our only two. Shoelaces are just a rope weaved across the top of the human foot, and I don't think we think about it that often because I never did, but when we're walking, we're actually just lifting our shoe off the ground with the top of our foot. And the lace needs to be shaped the way that the human foot is. Otherwise, it's collapsing the arches and really damaging the entire body, to the tips of the fingers, to the tip of the head. So what we label as In the Image Clothing Company's shoelacing technique is what we have to do for every human ever. There's no opinion on what you think you want or what you think you like or what you think is important. Your feet are the foundation of your whole body, and they have to be unaltered or your whole body's altered. So with our technique, we tie our shoes evenly over toward the inside on both feet to the center line of the human being that is there, that we don't have a say over. And if that's not being the case, the entire body is going to be in a twist rotation-wise from its very foundation. So secondly, we remove all tags from clothing. Anywhere a tag is placed within clothing, it's causing a physical gap, just altering the body's skeletal system's only working position and not allowing it to be, and or just pressing against the musculature where that tag is, not allowing it to activate. And then some other parts of the body are trying to do some sort of compensation, and now not only the part where the tag is altered, but then other parts of the body trying to like adjust for that are being altered as well. So let's get into this, because this video is actually titled The Human Body as a Whole, because I talk about very often, like what I just said, if anything within the body isn't working correct, something else and many things have to compensate, because it all goes where any of it goes. Anywhere my hand goes, my left foot goes, if we're talking about the right hand. But that's like just about the farthest thing away from the thing we're talking about. But it's all connected. The body can only ever work as a whole. It's just a mechanical machine. It just has functions, and it only does it all together, or else it can't really actually do it at all. So the human body as a whole, it's something that has to be looked at. I've talked about many times how I've got a problem with specialists. It's nothing about me and my opinions, but if you're looking at just part of the body, but it's actually affected from another part of the body, then no matter how much you try to address something like the hand and try to get it to be in a good working position, if your foot is being pulled external, being away from its own center by a shoelace being tied incorrect, then you'll never get to the bottom of your hand, and it's problems, okay? So the body only works as a whole. Specialists will only ever be able to do so much. That's why I have a problem with them. It's no kind of thing about me, but the whole point of going to a doctor is to try to aid your body and help it. And you just never can if you're not looking at it as an entirety. So that's just how real it is. And so we talk about things like, wasting our times with workouts, chiropractors, diets, because if you're altering the body in any way, then that's being altered no matter what. So anything you try to do additional to almost like counteract it can't. You have to only let it do what it will do. And we didn't decide what it does do. So let's look at the body as a whole, because when I talk about the core always having to stay activated, if there's ever a moment that it isn't, the body's damaged. There's only a neutral to every position of the body, and I talk about this often, right? The neutral wrist here, straight out from the pinky, okay? The neutral ankles that just naturally follow that outward curvature of the lower leg, the neutral pelvis, which is what's going to keep our spine neutral. Then we have a neutral spine, and then a neutral jaw, stabilizing our body. The neutral shoulder position, which then allows the elbow to be straight and extended to that neutral wrist, to then have the hand be working in line. This is what I mean why I have a problem with specialists. I don't have opinions on these things because I didn't decide any of them, because I didn't design the human body. There's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled, "We Didn't Design It, We Can't Decide It." And that's just how it is. So that's why I can say things as bold as I can, because I don't have opinions on this that I'm trying to get anybody to believe. I'm just discussing things that a lot of people don't know. And that's why I'm discussing them, is so that we can all learn together, because I didn't know until I did, right? So we can't be held accountable for what we don't know. And so I can't really get after doctors for giving false advice, because if they don't know either, they don't know. So times and places, right? But if you are trying to have your handwork correct, it has to start at your feet. Because like I was just showing, the position of the neutral shoulders that allows the neutral elbow, meaning just fully extended, and a neutral wrist to allow those fingers to track in line, that all has to happen where your shoulders work behind your body. But your shoulders will never just work in their normal position if your feet aren't working, okay? So I talk so often about internal rotation, and that's closer to the center line, and external rotation is farther away. Now, external rotation is something we never under In the Image Clothing Company try to get, because it's something that will happen. It's a more dropped position. It's farther away from the body's center, which is where the activation is. The upper trapezius, for example, these muscles up here that we talked about at the beginning, they pull not only up, but they pull closer to the center of the body. And so, like, look at the distance of my elbow here, right? And my rib cage. We need to be able to get our elbows all the way to our own sides, regardless of how much fat content you've got between anything on any part of the body. We need to be able to be against our own selves without like clothing in the way, right? Look at this, upper trapezius, when there's an extra gap because clothing's too large, okay? Now, internal rotation is the only rotation that needs to be addressed. If you have even internal rotation on both sides of your body and every part of your body, just meaning allowing your body to work as a whole, with the focus being only on internal, then your body's just going to work well. I know that sounds really cut and dry, but that's the case. Because when there is imbalance and when there is damage, when there is deactivation within muscles, now you're in external rotation. And so I've said many times, two things is what you can boil down in the Image Clothing Company's focus within the human body to getting: a posterior tuck of the pelvis and internal rotation of the body in all its joints, because that's really all you have to do, and then everything will follow. If the shoulder has its natural, like if you're in external rotation of your shoulders here, and then you get this shoulder to have natural internal rotation, now you have a neutral wrist. If you get your pelvis to tuck, that will just place your shoulders back, because now the spine will be neutral, allowing the shoulders to just be open. See this internal rotation? It's back here. If your shoulders are here, you can't. You just get binding because things are hitting against each other, bones. So at the pelvis, since we now tucked it posteriorly and we have internal rotation at the shoulder and neutral, also when we tuck the pelvis, activating these muscles of the core, leaving them that way, they'd always naturally be unless altered by something, but they are, if they are, by clothing, then tucking that pelvis, instead of traveling up to the shoulder, really in addition to, now we travel down to our feet. And the arches in our feet can then activate. I'm gonna step back. I'm trying to stay close for the audio sake, but I'm gonna step over here so you can see my feet. Now, when we stand, our feet need to point forward, as I say. So like I was discussing, if you're addressing your hand at a hand specialist, but your feet are like this, sticking out, your wrists will never be neutral. And so if you try to get your wrist neutral by going to some hand specialist or doing maybe grip exercises or working on massaging out your hand, you can do that for the rest of your life. But if your feet are still being altered, you will never address your hand's natural function. So tucking that pelvis allows your feet to grip those arches, and then we can just walk forward, the body working as a whole, everything in its neutral, and we're unaltered. But what you'll see so often, and I've talked about it so often up until today within in the Image Clothing Company content, is people's feet sticking out. That's external rotation and only. Now, I know that this might sound a little bit different than a lot of people are saying, but the feet should actually just about never stick anywhere farther out than straight forward. Because when we walk, I'm gonna just walk back and forth, or at least I'll walk back there and then I'll keep talking while I'm over there. The feet roll in like this. We use the outside of the feet because following those legs down in that neutral position through the ankle, clear to the heel of the foot, it's that natural outward curvature. And so the feet actually roll in when we walk. Now, watch me walk this way. Okay, nothing adjusting within the body, hips staying even, feet slightly inward just because that's how the angle is going to stay there, allowing for no compensation to have to happen within parts of the body. And if your feet point out ever, what happens, and take that with a grain of salt when I say ever, but what happens is the core will deactivate, because as the legs come up into the hips, the way that these hips open for these upper leg bones to come into them, the hips kind of shape like this on the sides, and the femur, this upper leg bone, comes into the hip. And so if your legs are pointing out at the feet, what happens is this core will deactivate to be able to allow room for that external foot to just move now against this hip, right? So now your pelvis has gone anterior, which is here, rather than posterior, deactivating your core here. These muscles can't go anywhere different than the bones that they're attached to are going. So now you've deactivated your core and your whole body is suffering because your feet pointed out. And that had to happen at the hips just to allow room for the bones of the upper leg and the actual hip pelvis structure to not hit into each other. Now, that's how most all people are, because if your pant waistline isn't higher in the front just slightly, then your pelvis is altered, and so now your feet are going to stick out anyway. Otherwise there's a bind from this end down rather than the feet up. So the body just has to work as a whole. If there's ever anything you're trying to address in it, you just never will if you're not looking at all of it. Because you can never have a neutral wrist without a neutral shoulder. You can never have healthy feet arches without a neutral pelvis. And that's just it. There's no, that's why I say there's no exercises to do. There's only allowing the body to work or damaging it. That's it. There's no opinion I could even have on it. So yeah, I think that's all I'm gonna say actually. For this video, that's a really good one. Also, since 2024, when most all those videos were made, you can just see, not for any kind of ego on my part, but for using myself as the example, as I do within In The Image Clothing Company, being the founder, my body has changed immensely and only back to natural, the way that our God designed our bodies to work after decades of patterning that I was personally in from clothing. So it just is what it is. It's as real as it is, and the body has to always only and only ever will work as a whole. So like I said, my name is Evan Strong, the founder of In The Image Clothing Company. We will have clothing available made out of 100% natural materials, staying centered, fitting correct, and that's how we allow the body to work. Now, if you ever decide to purchase In The Image Clothing Company clothing, just do everything that you can to get it in your size. Oversized clothing is in itself such an imbalance, as I discussed a little bit within this, and as we talk about so often when we just talk about the importance of clothing. That's our whole company physically. Now, check out the podcast if you'd like to. In The Image Clothing Company podcast. It's awesome. It's where I've been like putting focus for the past few months, and I'm so grateful for it. We've had some amazing discussions. It's been only me up until now, and maybe it will continue to. As I said when we founded the podcast part of the company, right? I was like, you know, we might have people on, but it might only ever be me, and I'm still not sure, and it wouldn't need to change. But I get into some really deep discussions, and I talk about things thoroughly. I do all that I can to just talk about things as they are and keep my opinions out of them. So deep rooted discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ, aka the truth of all things. And so check us out, all thirds of the company if you'd like to. And I'm grateful that we're still here, that we're still what we are, because as I've said, that's how it's going to be. We speak truths, and so what we talk about won't ever change. Truth is eternal. It's apart from all of us. It's just what it is. I always say, don't believe me, meaning you don't have to, but if there's truth within what I'm saying, take that, right? So I'm just so grateful, because when I founded In The Image Clothing Company, I didn't really have any expectations by any means, because I just kind of like stumbled upon this. I started just doing it, and I didn't even know what I was doing at first. And just things like the proof, if you will, that this is what it is by my own body's functioning. There's no exercises that I've done, not a single one, since before the founding of In the Image Clothing Company. Not a single workout, and I used to in the past, right? The body will just work within our own situations to our own degrees if it's not being restricted, inhibited, altered, changed, pulled out of its only neutrals, and there we go. So, thank you. Like I said, today's the 22nd of March, 2025. Check out In the Image Clothing Company music if you'd like to as well. I don't currently have a guitar. I did there for a few months, and I put quite a few music clips on that third of our company when I did have a guitar, but I'll get another one, plus just all the ways that I approach music, I just will. So, thank you. Seriously.